Welcome to the Hope a Thanga podcast. I'm Alyssa Atkins, the Training and Development Coordinator, and with me today is Crystal Cedino, the Training and Development Manager for the Native Learning Center. Today on the show, we are excited to have our special guest, Tada Atone, Esquire, founder, president of Jackrabbit Development, LLC. On today's episode, we are going to be giving you all a snippet of the Seminole Tribe's 5th Annual Renewable Energy and Sustainability Conference. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the 5th Annual Seminole Tribe of Florida Renewable Energy and Sustainability Conference will focus on the newly changing landscape for tribal energy development and sustainability, including best practices, federal leadership, policy and regulatory changes, funding a project, and project planning development trends. The conference will give the tribes and First Nations an opportunity to explore the range of renewable energy and sustainability opportunities that exist and how to start the process. Representatives from tribes, First Nations, non-governmental organizations, and private industries will give presentations and provide training objectives on a wide range of topics, including resources to help with tribal energy projects, achieving self-sufficiency through energy planning and resource development, energy saving methods in design, development, and construction, tribes undertaking large-scale energy projects, developments driving change in the renewable energy and sustainability marketplace, tribal/private partnerships opportunities, tribal case studies and lessons learned, funding sources for projects, leveraging available federal resources and materials to support tribes and TDHE Housing Department. Therefore, Tada is going to share her expertise on what's the buzz and sustainability in Indian country. Would you like to take it over, Tada?
Sure, I guess. Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me to be on the show again. I really enjoy your all's podcast, and I'm honored to be a part of it. And thank you for inviting me to participate in the conference. I'm really excited about your conference. It actually started the same year that Jackrabbit started, and so it's been really nice to see the growth of the interest in sustainability within our community. So yeah, and I guess, do you want me to just go on, or shall we?
Sure, let's dive in.
Tell us.
I'm excited
Well,
to
I
hear.
think first remind our guests of
Oh,
who you are, what
Yes.
you do, and then let's talk about what we're gonna basically talk about at the conference.
yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for reminding me. As you and I were talking earlier, right? We're not always the best about speaking about ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm an enrolled Kiowa citizen, and I'm also the president and founder of Jackrabbit Development. I have a background in law and federal Indian law specifically, but my real passion is in sustainability. So Jackrabbit Development started off as a sustainable general contractor. Then we sort of grew into a sustainable architecture company. And now we're really just focusing on sustainability as a whole. So as opposed to sort of being pigeoned into one idea of sustainability, we've grown into a much larger vision of what sustainability is, which is right along with what the United Nations talks about when it comes to sustainability. And so we've really started to grow into economic development and consulting, and how to really design a sustainable community, not just when it comes to building and architecture, but when it comes to a whole approach of life, if you will. So that's kind of my background and expertise. I've been working in the sustainability field for almost 20 years now. So before there were even words like net zero, we were discussing being off grid and what that meant. And so I've really enjoyed seeing this proliferation, if you will, of sustainability, not just in our communities, but really across the country. And certainly now with the administration that we have in place, putting a ton of funding towards sustainability measures.
Absolutely. I remember our first conference as well. I remember at the time, I think the big issue, and I'm sure, there is still an issue with it, but battery storage was the huge topic of conversation. And now seeing it progress, because we're now on the 5th annual, we skipped one year because of COVID, and then we did the following year virtually, which was kind of really cool to see that all come together. And then this year we're coming back and doing it on site, which is amazing. So it'll be the first energy on site since COVID. And with that, just the progression of everything. And then, like you said, the amount of funding that's now out. I'm just like mind blown and really excited to see the progression of all these projects, as we're having a few returning guests from previous years, and we're seeing their progression in projects, you know, the work that they've done within their tribes or the tribes that they're working for. And it's really cool, you know, to just see that gradual progression. And that was only, for me, it was, I think, 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. So that's kind of, you know, I think I was the receptionist at the time, and I was just like, hi, how can I help you? So it was a cool time. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what's your viewpoint in that progression, Tata?
That it is, as you mentioned, slow going. So it's
Yeah.
not happening, I think, nearly as quickly as we need it to happen for our world in general. But also really just, I think, creating more hope. For a while, I will be frank, I kind of lost some despair around sustainability, where I was like, wow, it just seems like it's just not going as fast enough as it needs to. And like, I'm sure Greta Thunberg would agree, right? We're not making nearly as many policy changes and lifestyle changes as we need to really slow the progression. I mean, reading articles about like the plankton being gone in the Atlantic Ocean. So in 20 years, we can expect to start seeing, large life forms like whales and dolphins die off. That makes me kind of sad, but also, as you mentioned, like there's been this progression, and it's really almost been in some sense really quickly compared to the first 15 years that I was doing this type of work, where all of a sudden in the last 5-6 years we've really seen tons of people come into this market and come into this sort of space and say, yeah, we want to be a part of this, and we want to help make these goals a reality. And so that to me is really exciting, that we are having new terms, that we're seeing this sort of renaissance with not just with our fundamental knowledge as American Indians. So a lot of the things that they're proving with science, we've been saying for thousands of years, and if not at least the last 200, 300 years in this country, saying like, we understand our environment, we understand how to live within this environment, and maybe you should learn a little bit from us about what we know about this place, specifically Turtle Island. And so we're really seeing that, the acceptance of that, and actually the almost seeking of that knowledge now. And that is a really huge jump from where we were like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, no, all valid points. All right. Now, tell us about what you're going to be presenting on, and, the whole idea behind it and everything.
Yeah. So I again was really honored when you all reached out to me. I felt a bit shocked at the time because I was like, I don't know if I'm ahead of the knowledge or if I know about this. So I really took some time to reflect and ask. And when you mentioned, let's talk about sustainability projects in Indian country, I was like, yeah, you're right. I do know a lot of people doing a lot of amazing work. So I've had a lot of fun putting this presentation together, actually, because it allowed me to reach out to my friends doing work in really different areas, but all centered around sustainability. So I really wanted to take a step back, because I know while the conference has this energy focus, and don't get me wrong, we really do need to learn about renewable and clean energy. There are so many other aspects to sustainability. And so I wanted to focus on, first off, the fact that, there are 17 different goals for the United Nations on how to reach a more sustainable society, and get away from just the tunnel vision of energy and sustainability. Because I think now in these few years, we really do equate that. If we talk about sustainability, people automatically think wind and solar as the only thing, and there are just so much more when it comes to sustainability. So for this presentation, I really want to focus on 4, potentially 5 of the UN sustainability goals, which is zero hunger in society, affordable and clean energy. Obviously needed to talk about one of those things, otherwise, would have gotten away from our ubiquitous energy discussion. But then also decent work and economic growth, and sustainable cities and communities. And so I really wanted to talk about these other projects that are occurring that are also linked to sustainability. And so I wanted to talk really about the food that's going on, this indigenous food renaissance that's been occurring. I've actually had the great privilege of eating at two restaurants that I found on a New York Times article about indigenous food. So the Gojo Cafe, which is run by the White Mountain Apache Behavioral Center over in White River, Arizona. And also then Awamni, which I'm sure most of us have heard of, the sous chef's new restaurant. He got a James Beard Award, but really focusing on how this industry is actually bringing back indigenous foods and making indigenous foods trendy, if you will. And how that really goes to sustainability in our society when we talk about our long-term health goals and being a really healthy society. When we were colonized and put onto reservations and became dependent upon the commodity foods, that really took away our food sovereignty, but it also took away a lot of our health. Right now, it's not uncommon to go to a reservation and see 3 out of 4 people on diabetes or have diabetes or on dialysis, and that's not sustainable for our society. It's definitely not sustainable for our communities. And so having these foods become a trendy thing and getting James Beard Awards, it really speaks to how we can start to reimagine our food systems, and also just tribes taking over farms and making regenerative agriculture a trendy thing is occurring across the country, from Nebraska and the Winnebago tribe, where you're going to be just south of, all the way to a little place that I went to in California just recently, the Palma Valley, where they can trace their ancestry for 5,000 years to that valley, and are now taking over a lot of the ranches and farms as the people who came there get out of that society. A lot of people in this generation are not inclined to want to become farmers, and so the older generation are selling off the farms as people are moving into the cities, and the tribes are buying them back up and turning them into regenerative agriculture. So it's super exciting for me. Sorry, I just wanted to take a break because I know I just spewed a bunch of stuff.
No, it's okay. I love that you brought the food up and that you're going to discuss it, because that is, I think, something that most people tend to forget. And I think what you said, everybody thinks of solar systems and the wind, and so nobody really thinks of food. And I'm really happy that you're going to be discussing that, because food is a huge part of our community and who we are, and it represents us. So eating healthy and clean and being able to promote your own food is amazing.
Have your own grocers in Indian country that's run by those members of your community. But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think food always just goes way over our heads, because I think a lot of the time we tend to think of food agriculture, or USDA, which yes, obviously, but also there is a huge role that it plays in with energy and sustainability, and it just, there's so much that goes into it, and kind of circles around all of that. So
it's like a domino effect.
Yeah, basically that's a good way to put it, Alyssa.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we talk a lot about in Jackrabbit is, we've moved away from this idea of what are the 3 things you really need for survival? You need food, you need water, and you need shelter. These are 3 key things we know for survival. And we really, I think in this country and in a lot of other places, which is why the UN sustainability goals are so clear, that we've taken those 3 needs out and then just had this tunnel vision on carbon reduction and energy. And frankly, energy is great. Don't get me wrong. I have a lot of respect for energy. I love my fridge. I love the appliances I use, my computer right now, right? But ultimately, the computer is not going to keep me fed, clothed, or sheltered when it comes down to survival basics. And so when we can start to reframe what we're talking about with sustainability around clean water. I mean, we saw this huge rise in water protectors right after the whole issue at Standing Rock. I mean, that had been occurring across Indian country for some time. The issue of pipelines is not a new issue to our communities, but we really saw water protectors held into sort of this new reverence that wasn't occurring before. Before, they were the grassroots organizers that were protesting places, and people were looking down on them, oh, it's water protectors, right? And now it's no, water is sacred. And we're seeing it not just in our community, but if you see most recently the Strange World movie that got put out, they're talking about how essentially the continent turtle world is alive. And then also in Frozen, it talks about how water has memory and the sacredness of water. And so we're seeing almost mainstream society also start to accept these ideas around water. And we've been saying this for some time, we've got to protect the water. Like this is a key thing to our survival.
Yeah. I mean, also just think about Flint, Michigan too, which is like, huge. I mean, and then I know during COVID, there were a lot of reservations. I want to say particularly the Navajo that experienced a lot of issues with water during COVID. So just, I mean, like you said, the very three important items, shelter, water, and food, like those are just basic, you know what I mean? Like needs for survival. And like you said, your computer's not going to really keep you fed. What happens? I've always seen those like, what are they? The movies, the apocalyptic movies where like power goes out. What would you do? You're going to have to learn how to live off the land. And what happens if you don't have access to clean water? And how are you going to survive? Where is that sustainability factor there, So absolutely.
Yeah. In fact, they have some studies now that show about energy. So I live in Phoenix, and in the summer we will experience months of temperatures over 100 degrees, but they have pretty apocalyptic studies that show that if the power goes out in the middle of the summer, that potentially millions of people are going to die in Phoenix because they, one, won't have a way to get out of the city, because when the power goes out, right, the gas pumps don't work. And even if you could, with a full tank, get out of the city, you're barely going to get out of the valley in the heat. So you're still going to be stuck in 110. And after 2 days of being exposed to 110-degree temperatures, your body actually starts to shut down. Your organs start to shut down. Everything starts to shut down. And so while energy is incredibly important, right, like when it comes to some of our metropolis cities, because we haven't almost forgotten as a society about some of these like really important things like food and water, right? We won't know how to get through some of these events when they do happen, when people are cut off from running water or cut off from their food supply. We saw during COVID, right? Where shelves went empty and people weren't getting enough access to some of the fresh foods, and that was a problem. And I think it really awakened people's eyes to the fact that we sort of lost control, if you will, over our own food sources.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, just think about, COVID specifically, the safety. We have tribal elders that need protecting, and, they can't be exposed to something that's so dangerous, something as COVID. So think about, I mean, if your community did know how and was able to create their own produce, create their own, food source, essentially, you limit that, back and forth of contamination or, exposure, I should say, actually, of, COVID and anything else that could be detrimental to our tribal elders. So there's just so much, weaves into this topic alone. So
everything affects each other.
Right, exactly. So, no, I'm excited for this conversation or this presentation when you get here in Florida. But did you have anything else you want to add, or what else, we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, so we're not just going to talk about food. It's just one of the things. I did promise some people that I would mention other projects beyond just food, because there's a lot of really great work occurring in the sustainability. So another one of the things I was really excited to talk about, because I'll save the energy for the last, but another one is about decent work and economic growth. So I know a lot of us in Indian country really had an eye-opening when COVID hit and so many of the casinos were shut down and people were literally, their income streams just cut off overnight. So I really saw a lot of people sort of awakening to the idea of diversification in our economies. And one of the amazing projects that I've been watching on LinkedIn is Bailey Walker's work. He's the president of the American Indian Chamber of Commerce, and he has created a trade delegation and commission to Australia. And so he's really trying to get entrepreneurs and Indian country to look at how we do exporting and actually increase our game in the export world, because, as we right now sort of have in our community, $1 will leave within a few minutes out of our economy.
Right.
Whereas if you can be exporting, you're bringing more money back into the economy. And so, bringing those types of ideas to our community, I think, are fairly new. The idea of trading with Australia as Indian nations, or trading with Africa as an Indian nation, or countries within Africa, that is a whole new way to approach our economics that goes way beyond just gaming. It is truly a way to help keep growing our economy. And so I'm super excited to get to highlight some of the work that Bailey's been doing when it comes to economic growth. And then one of the other projects that I was going to highlight is the American Indian Center in Minneapolis, and design and planning. So one of my good friends, Sam Olbertson, he's an architect out of Minneapolis, and he's been doing a lot of really great projects that bring in the indigenous cultural and values, bring in indigenous planning. So being influenced by nature around it and the environment, and types of cultural values that come through with stories or things like that, and bringing that into the entire planning process of projects. So when we're talking about building a building or planning out a site, he's not just talking about the building itself, he's also talking about those things like, what type of plants do we have around? Are we planting indigenous plants? Are we bringing in invasive species because they look nice? And those types of things. And so I was going to highlight this project because I saw also Native Learning Center had posted about the Minneapolis American Indian Center, and he's been pretty intimately involved as the architect and designer on that project. So I was going to bring him some information about that. And then lastly, of course, the ubiquitous energy projects. So I was going to talk about the project that went on in Navajo, actually, with the ARPA and CARES Act funding. So under the first round of funding for COVID, as you mentioned, there was an issue around water, also an issue around energy. Over 15,000 households in Navajo Nation still don't have electricity. And so a company came in with the ARPA money and CARES Act money specifically, and installed, by January, they will have 300 houses installed with off-grid solar systems. So they brought in solar packs, like racks of solar panels, and also a battery system, and connected and wired houses so that they could have some basic electricity to run fridges and run their cell phones and some basic appliances. Because, for instance, you can't keep medicine cold if it needs to be cold if you don't have electricity. Those types of things. And so that's a really cool project where I'm seeing a community actually embrace the idea of off-gridness and beyond just the Blue Lake Mountain Rancheria that did a really cool off-grid community. And its whole, this takes it more into the micro level, into the individual residences, and being able to bring them to modern amenities while still, inherently having an off-grid system.
Definitely. Oh, this is exciting.
I'm so glad. I was afraid you all would be like, I don't know what you're, Tata, you take this to a whole different perspective than we were thinking, but I really wanted to bring something that was more interesting beyond, again, just the focus on energy.
Right. Well, I mean, it's all, the conference is about renewable energy and sustainability. And I do have to admit, there's not always a deep conversation about, sustainability and, just water, food, all those things. So I do appreciate the fact that you are closing out our conference with, that point, that the topic, essentially, just talking about all these different projects that are going on or that have happened, and the success, the success that they've had with all of it. So no, this is good.
Oh, great.
I'm excited for this.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we inspire some next conversations and next projects that go beyond just the energy, because there is a lot of money flowing right now, obviously for energy projects, but for a lot of the other stuff too. And so helping to get communities and tribal leaders and people in these positions to, again, think just beyond the energy, like what are these ways that we can promote sustainability in our communities, that obviously include energy, but are a little bit larger in their goals.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's just, it's such an important, topic. to touch on when we're, when we are talking about energy. So, and essentially the whole point of the conference is to start those conversations or kind of be the catalyst to those conversations so that other projects potentially get off the ground. We held or I was part of a TA for, where did I go? I want to say I went to South Dakota, and we were working with Robert Cloud. I don't want to butcher names or anything like that. We were doing a TA, and it was for small business, but it was specifically for this group of individuals who are working on energy projects. And let me tell you something, a lot of those individuals were young, like, I don't want to say kids. I don't want to be disrespectful because I'm sure they were all young adults and so on and so forth, but they were young and they had these great grandiose ideas and, they're trying to get it off the ground. So it's conferences like this essentially that, help motivate people to be like, oh, there is room or space for me to do X, Y, Z within, this field. And it's like, absolutely, so that's what we're here to do, kind of motivate and showcase what is available and possible. So it's, it's just, it plays such an important part. Go ahead, Osa, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was gonna say it definitely challenges all age groups.
Mhm.
The young or the young adults are stepping up, and it makes the older like, okay, they can do it. Why can't I do it? And then it starts making you think like, okay, maybe I should think outside of the box. Maybe I should start gardening. What are ways that I can help? So I think your closing keynote is going to be very inspirational because just talking about the food and water with you, I was like, well, what can I do? Like, how can I start? Is there something that I could put with the faucet? I can probably start gardening. So I definitely think it starts making people ask questions like, what can I do? Where do I start? How do we get started? Which is very exciting.
Thank you. That made me think of one of the projects I saw in Nebraska, back to the Winnebago tribe. And I know we hear a lot about Ho-Chunking, but they are really doing some amazing work. One of the things that they started was this farmers market, and one of the things they started regrowing was their corn. And because what they found out was there were like maybe 2 or 3 elders who were still alive in their community that still had that traditional knowledge. And so they capitalized on the fact that they still had access to these elders who had this traditional knowledge and were able to get them to transfer that knowledge to the younger generation. And that's what I'm hoping we'll see a lot more of, because as we saw again with COVID, right, a lot of our elders died off and we lost a lot of this cultural knowledge, a lot of the knowledge that we really kind of need, even about some basic ways to prepare food or basic ways to grow things. And so it's seeing that again, like I heard someone call it a renaissance. I was like, you're right, though. It is a renaissance of indigenous knowledge. Because like, for instance, my dad, as a full-blood Kiowa and Choctaw, he grew up in a generation when it wasn't good to be Indian, right? His father was a product of a boarding school. My great-grandfather, right, where we were told it's not good to be Indians, like don't do that. And now we have this opportunity almost to restore that knowledge and really showcase our knowledge and our fundamental truths that we've held and have passed through generations, to really bring that to light at this time, because the world is calling out for like solutions to some of these issues. And we've been saying like, hey, we had the solutions the whole time if you would have listened to us. But now they are, right? Now people are listening to us and in finding that these things are important. And I was just I've been watching a series on Hulu. It's about food that built America. Miss Fields made $1 million empire off of cookies, right? But what if we did that like the Tonka bars? I mean, if you look at the Tonka project, right? They had a really good recipe, came onto the market really hard, and then other companies saw the opportunity, so they tried to like kind of squash them out. But now they're working with bison and doing regenerative agriculture with the bison and with the recipes, and taking that, again, traditional food and making it a monetary product and capitalizing on it while also doing positive things for the world. So it's like a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate that whole idea of squashing, because you know what I always find funny too? Because people who do that, right, who try and push others out of the field, who are maybe the originators of that idea or product or whatever it may be, they know what's best, I think, most of the time, because they've done the trial and error, because they've had the experience to, either live with the product or work with, whatever it is, they've had that. And then they push them out, and then they end up having to go back to them to ask, for information or how to do it. And it's like, well, had you kept me here, none of this would have ever, you know what I mean? We wouldn't have had to come to this. So leave natives alone and let them do their thing. It's always my, kind of like thought process. So yeah, no, it's the economy, it's just crazy. But that is really cool that, again, there are other projects like that going on.
Mm-hmm.
Or examples, I should say, examples. But yeah, no, this is such a good conversation, Tata.
Good. I'm so glad. Thank you, Crystal, and thank you, Lisa. I'm excited. I'm glad you all are happy again, because it did really kind of stump me, because I can talk a lot about energy projects, but I think this stuff, not that I don't honor and respect energy, but we focus so much on it, and there's been such a huge discussion around it for years. And we forgot about these other things. So I'm hoping, we can focus a little on the other stuff. And in next conference, maybe we'll have some indigenous chefs preparing some amazing indigenous food at your conference.
See, and this is what I'm saying. Like, we never know what can come of this stuff. So how cool would that be, to be part of that? You see that growth, and oh my God, like I can, I can implement this in my community, or we can start this, or there's space for everything. So yeah, how cool would that be though?
Right? Planting seeds.
Yeah, planting seeds, exactly. I don't know. Tata, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I want to leave some for the actual
Little
presentation.
mysteries.
Some mystery, some mystery.
That way people will want to come and hear more, because I am a wealth of useless information from
No, not useless.
Not useless at
No,
all.
you're right. I have a lot of information. I do a lot of traveling, and I network in a lot of different areas. And so I do have a lot of things that I'd love to share. I found it hard to try to reduce down to these projects for for this presentation, just because there are just so many examples right now. And thank you, ladies, for helping me, because frankly, at the time I was kind of going through a moment of despair and sustainability, and it really kind of revived my faith and hope that, like, we can turn things around and we can really build a better community for our children and the generations to come. And so I really appreciate you inspiring hope in me again by having me go through this exercise.
Oh, we love that. No, thank you. Aw, that makes me
Really, yes.
Yeah,
We appreciate your words.
Yeah, I always have the belief that it only takes one person. I know that's always so corny, and people are like, really? Does it? But yeah, it does. It only takes one person. And then from there, it's just like planting a seed. You just watch it grow. It, goes on from there. But no, thank you. That's very, very sweet of you. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for your knowledge, and thank you for encouraging others to share their knowledge with the youth and with everyone, so we can continue this generational knowledge.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us today. That brings us. Did you want to add something, Crystal?
Do you want to do a plug for your website or anything you've got going on, information, so people can reach out to you?
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, I'm going to plug two things.
Because
I think part of the reason I was going through despair is I've been focusing a lot on being a lawyer recently.
Yes.
Because some of these sustainability projects can take a long time, and the funding before some of the money started flowing was difficult to come by. That for Jackrabbit, we're here to assist communities in planning, from having a vision to making it come to fruition, all the way to like buildings and program management. But actually, I'd really like to plug being a lawyer, and for all those entrepreneurs coming down. I've spent a lot of time over the past year doing work with the Small Business Credit Initiative. So if you're an entrepreneur or you're a tribal enterprise, there is money coming down the pipeline into Indian country or even into your state to help develop projects, develop small businesses, whether you are already a small business or somebody wanting to bring an idea to the market. There's going to be money, and I really hope that we as an Indian country can capitalize on this opportunity, because it is amazing the amount of money coming in to help small business owners, and to have access to lawyers, to have access to accountants, to have access to to business consulting and have somebody else paying for it is truly like a once in a lifetime opportunity. So that's all coming down this next year. And as a law firm, I've been doing a lot of work with tribes, the Auto law firm, but also helping entrepreneurs. I've been specializing in that. So just, it's one thing to talk about these great sustainable ideas, but we still have to have people bring them to the market and get them up and running. So if you're looking to do that, know that there's money coming and we can help you access it.
Absolutely. We got to get you on a webinar.
I was just about to say, it sounds like another webinar or podcast title right there. So
we got to get you on a webinar, maybe a couple, and oh, that would be great. Oh my gosh. Yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna have a list of coordinating all that.
Podcast.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Anything else?
Yeah, what was your second plug? Sorry if you mentioned.
Oh, no, that was it. That was my second plug, was for the entrepreneurs. Starting a business, like starting Jackrabbit, was not easy. And I was thankful and lucky to survive through COVID, but a lot of businesses didn't. And that doesn't mean that they weren't great ideas. It may have just been bad timing. So helping entrepreneurs to understand, like, here, there's still a lifeline or hope coming down the pipeline is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you for that. That's amazing.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I always enjoy it.
No problem. Thank you for coming on and like letting us know about the conference and what you're going to discuss. I am looking forward to it. I know Crystal looks really excited.
Yeah. God, it always shows on my face, doesn't it?
That's great, though. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Well, I hope you get to tune in, Crystal, at least for the conference.
Yes, I do plan on doing that much because, like I said, I helped set it up, so I'm like, I want to see it come to fruition. I want to be able to sit in a couple sessions at least. So definitely.
Well, thank you. I wish you the best of luck on your new journey.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But thank you, Todd. I appreciate that. Gotten a lot of kind words, and that's very, heartwarming. So just thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, it looks like that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you, Tada Tone, once again for joining us today. We truly appreciate it. I cannot wait to meet you in person. We hope you enjoy the episode. As always, thanks for listening to Hope Thing, a podcast. If you enjoy our show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Also, visit our website, www.nativelearningcenter.com, to find information on the upcoming webinar and trainings. And be sure to visit us back for more podcasts.
Yeah. All right. Again, thanks, Tada, and we'll catch you on the next episode, y'all.
Look forward to it. Thank you all.
Thanks.